She laughed at my hands. My daughter. Right in front of everyone at dinner. I was reaching for the butter when she raised her wine glass and said, "Look at Dad's hands, they look like dried-up tree roots." Then she laughed. Loud. Unbothered. Travis nearly choked on his steak. Even my granddaughter smirked. I stared at the fingers that once held her steady on a bike, bandaged her scraped knees, built her childhood bed. No one defended me. No one even looked sorry. That night, while they toasted dessert, I rewrote my will in silence. And I erased her name. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. They weren't always like this. There was a time my daughter, Lila, used to run to me the second I walked through the door. "Daddy," she'd squeal, arms up, little fingers grasping at air. She always smelled like crayons and peanut butter. I'd hoist her up with my tired arms that had just spent 10 hours tightening bolts under someone else's car, and she'd chatter away as if we'd been apart a century instead of a day. Back then, it was just the two of us. Marjorie passed away when Lila was 5. Breast cancer. Quick. Unfair. I remember the night we came home from the hospital. Lila asked if Mommy would be sleeping for a long time. I didn't know how to answer, so I just nodded and said, "We'll be okay, kiddo." I built our little routines out of that grief. Every Friday was pancakes for dinner, every Sunday we walked to the park with stale bread for ducks. I'd braid her hair every morning, not very well, but I tried. I learned to use her favorite pink ribbons, even though I always got them uneven. She never complained. She used to look in the mirror, smile, and say, "Mom would be proud." She was all I had. And I made sure she never felt like anything was missing. We didn't have much, but what we had, we shared. I worked at the garage from 6 to 3, then stocked shelves at Wilson's Market from 5 to 9. Lila would sit on a stool by the counter with her homework and a chocolate milk. I taught her math while restocking canned peas. When she turned 11, I built her a dollhouse from leftover wood scraps. Painted it lavender, just like her room. She cried when she saw it. Not because of how beautiful it wasn't, honestly, it leaned to one side and the paint was blotchy, but because she knew it came from my hands. The same hands she would later mock. Lila was a good kid growing up. Kind, curious, thoughtful. She made get-well cards for neighbors when they were sick. She wrote poetry in a little notebook she never let anyone read. She once used her birthday money to buy a sweater for a classmate whose family couldn't afford one. She used to sit at Marjorie's grave with me every October, when the leaves turned and the wind got sharp. We'd bring chrysanthemums, Marjorie's favorite, and Lila would talk about school, books she liked, things she missed about Mom. I'd sit there quietly, listening, holding her hand. It was a ritual. A bond. She never asked for big things. When she turned 16, I expected her to beg for a car. Instead, she asked if we could drive around and visit antique stores on her birthday. Just me and her. I thought I had done something right. I thought I had raised her well. When she got into university, I nearly collapsed with pride. I cashed out the little bond Marjorie and I had set aside, scraped together the rest with extra shifts, and made sure she never had to worry about tuition. I told her, "Study hard. I'll handle the rest." And I did. She always called back then. Letters too. Real letters. She'd tell me about her professors, her friends, the boy she was dating, Travis, back then just a name in pencil, not yet permanent. She even came home one Christmas with a surprise. She'd written a short story about me for her creative writing class. It was titled The Man Who Never Complained. I still have the printout. She gave it to me in a blue folder and said, "You're my hero, Dad." Funny how heroes age. How admiration turns into embarrassment. After graduation, she got a job in the city. Marketing firm. Fancy glass building, cold elevators, business lunches. She started wearing heels and dry-clean jackets. She stopped using the word dad and started saying my father. But even then, she still came by. At first, Sunday dinners stayed a thing for a while. She'd bring wine, show off new shoes, kiss my cheek. I'd cook pot roast, the kind Marjorie used to make. She'd always say it smelled like her childhood. She even helped me repaint the house once. We did the living room a soft cream color. She picked it out. "It'll make the space feel brighter," she said, rolling paint in zigzags across the wall. We laughed when she dripped a whole line down her jeans. But then came the distance. Subtle at first. A text instead of a visit. "Sorry, Dad, swamped at work." A skipped birthday. A forgotten anniversary. Excuses that turned into silences. When she married Travis, I was happy for her. Truly. I even gave them $20,000 from my retirement savings for a down payment on their house. She cried when I handed her the check. Said she didn't deserve it. I said, that's what parents do. After the wedding, though, she changed. Not overnight. But slowly, like a tide pulling away from shore. She didn't come by as much. When she did, Travis always talked over me. Corrected my stories. Called me old man like it was funny. I chalked it up to stress. To growing up. To life. But now, when I look back, really look, I see the cracks were always forming. I just didn't want to see them. I held on to the girl with the pink ribbons and poetry notebook. I refused to believe she could become the woman who would one day look at my hands, the very ones that built her life, and mock them like they were nothing. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruel part. I could have handled it better if it were a single explosion, a fight, a falling out, a clear moment when love turned sour. But it wasn't like that. It was slower, quieter. Like rust creeping under paint. You don't notice it until something breaks. At first, it was just the silences. The long pauses in our phone calls. The way she stopped laughing at my old stories. She used to love hearing about how I met her mother, how Marjorie threw a slice of pie at me when I called her Red instead of her name. Lila would giggle every time. Now she'd say, "You've told me that one, Dad," and change the subject. Then came the corrections. Little ones, but they stung. I'd call her on the phone and ask about her day, and she'd say, "It's Travis who had the meeting, not me," or, "No, Dad, I said Wednesday, not Thursday." Like my memory was the problem. Like I was always getting it wrong. I told myself it was just stress. I told myself she was tired, overworked, trying to juggle a demanding job and a new house and a husband with big ambitions. But there was something else beneath it. Something colder. She started calling less. Then she stopped calling at all. I'd leave voicemails. Just checking in. Made pot roast, thought of you. Hope you're well. No response. One day, I texted her a picture of the apple tree blooming in the backyard, the one she used to climb when she was little. I added, "Still strong after all these years." She replied with just a thumbs up emoji. The next time we spoke, she was different. Rushed. Distracted. She kept looking away, even in person. Like I was background noise. She said things like, "Dad, you really should consider downsizing." Or, "That house is way too much for one person." She smiled when she said it, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. I thought maybe she was worried about me, that's what I wanted to believe. But then Travis started saying it too. Loudly. "You ever think about selling this place?" he asked one day, his hand resting on the kitchen counter I built with my own hands. "I mean, it's good equity. Could be a nice little nest egg." He looked around like he already owned it. Like he was appraising it. I didn't answer him. Just kept washing the dishes. My hands shook a little, but not from age. Then came the jokes. Always jokes. At a small family gathering, I mentioned I had trouble logging into my bank account online. Travis chuckled and said, "Don't worry, old man, that's what kids are for, right? To keep you from burning the place down or losing your money." Lila didn't laugh. But she didn't say anything either. She just looked at her wine glass. After that, they began visiting less and less. When they did come, it was always for a reason. Some document that needed signing. Some paper that needed reviewing. They always brought excuses, always left quickly. I started to notice how they never asked about me. Not really. Not about my health, my routine, how I spent my time. It was always about the house. The value. The future. One day, I found a brochure in the kitchen drawer after they'd left. It was for Sunset Haven, a senior living complex out in the suburbs. Beautiful facility. Expensive. Efficient. Cold. Lila must have left it by accident. Or maybe not. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I feared the idea of going there, but because I never imagined my daughter thinking of it without talking to me first. Still, I didn't say anything. I let it go. I folded the brochure neatly and tucked it into a book I hadn't read in years. I pretended I hadn't seen it. But the signs kept piling up. Travis started calling me by my first name. "Hey, Gerald," he'd say, clapping me on the back like I was his coworker, not his father-in-law. "How's the plumbing holding up? Roof still good?" Always with that half smile. That tone. Even the grandkids started acting different. More distant. Too busy for stories. Too busy for board games or backyard walks. They stayed glued to screens, barely nodding hello when I entered the room. I couldn't blame them, they were just kids, following the cues around them. One afternoon, I baked Lila's favorite lemon pie. From scratch. Just like Marjorie used to make. I drove it to their house and rang the bell. Travis answered. Said Lila was resting after a stressful week. He took the pie without inviting me in. "Thanks, Gerald. She'll appreciate it." She never called to say thank you. That was the first night I sat in my living room and wondered if I had become invisible. Or maybe, unnecessary. The next Sunday, I went to their house for dinner. I was determined to believe it was all in my head. That maybe I was overthinking it. That maybe the love was still there, just quieter, just buried under adulthood and obligations. That's the night it happened. The night she mocked my hands. The same hands that held her as a baby. That built her dollhouse. That paid for her degree. The same hands she used to hold tight when she was scared. That night, they were a punchline. And I realized, this wasn't stress. This wasn't a phase. This was who she had become. And worse, it was who I had let her become. I shouldn't have gone to that dinner. Something in my gut told me not to. I was tired, the weather was turning cold, and my knees had been acting up all week. But Lila had insisted. Well, she'd sent a group text with the words, "Family dinner, 6 p.m., don't be late." Not quite an invitation. More like an order. I told myself maybe this was her way of reconnecting. Maybe she'd been thinking things over. Maybe she missed her father. I wore a clean shirt. Pressed it twice. Brought over a bottle of the red wine she used to like. The one we shared after she got her first job offer. I even stopped by the florist to pick up some fresh lilies. Marjorie's favorite. When I got there, the house was already full. People I didn't recognize. Travis's business partners, mostly. Some neighbors. Her coworkers. Loud laughter, the smell of catered food, wine glasses clinking. Lila didn't greet me right away, she was too busy telling some story near the fireplace. I stood in the doorway, holding the flowers and wine, waiting like I didn't belong. Finally, she saw me. "Dad," she said flatly, giving me a side hug, then turning back to her guests. "Put the wine on the table." "No, thanks." No smile. Just a gesture toward the kitchen. I quietly set the flowers down, poured myself a glass of water, and took a seat at the far end of the dining table. Travis was holding court as usual, talking about market shares and real estate flips like he'd invented them. I tried to talk to my granddaughter, who was sitting beside me. I asked how school was going. She nodded. "Fine." I asked if she was still painting. She shrugged. "Not really." Then, the food came out. A big roast, mashed potatoes, salad in one of those wooden bowls you only see in fancy homes. I reached for the butter, my hands a little slow from arthritis, and that's when it happened. Lila tilted her head, smirked, and said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Careful, Dad. Your hands look like dried-up tree roots. Don't snap anything." Laughter followed. A burst from Travis. A snicker from the guy next to him. Even my granddaughter pressed her lips together in a smile. I froze. My hand hovered over the butter dish, fingers curled mid-motion. I looked down at them, cracked knuckles, thin skin, the veins like little blue rivers. She used to hold those hands when crossing the street. I didn't say a word. Didn't touch the butter. Just brought my hand back to my lap. My throat went dry. The glass of water felt too far away. No one said anything. No apology. No correction. Just laughter that faded into conversation about stock portfolios. It wasn't just the joke. It was the silence after it. That kind of silence speaks louder than any insult. I sat through the rest of that meal like a ghost. I chewed, but I didn't taste anything. I nodded when spoken to, smiled when expected. But inside, something was cracking. After dessert, which I didn't touch, I stood up. Lila didn't even look at me. She was busy showing off some new piece of artwork she'd bought. Abstract, overpriced nonsense, if you ask me. "I think I'll head out," I said. She looked up, distracted. "You didn't finish your pie." "I'm not hungry." Travis said, "Big day tomorrow, huh, Gerald? Retirement does that to a man." Another laugh. Another sip of wine. I left without another word. I sat in my truck in their driveway for 10 minutes before I started the engine. Just stared out the windshield, hands gripping the steering wheel. The same hands she mocked. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. Just sat on the couch. In the dark. I looked around at the home I'd built. Every corner held a memory. The notch in the wall from where Lila tripped and bumped her head. The curtain rod she helped install when she was 13. The piano Marjorie saved up for with her teacher's salary. It used to be a house full of noise. Laughter. Music. The smell of pot roast and burning cookies. Now it was just quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Hollow quiet. I walked to my desk and opened the drawer. Pulled out the will. The one I had written years ago, the one that left everything to Lila. The house. The savings. The small plot of land behind the shed. Even the photo albums. Everything. I stared at it for a long time. And then I picked up a pen. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even revenge. It was clarity. A kind of cold, painful clarity that only comes after you've been humiliated by the person you love most in the world. I didn't even cry. Not then. That would come later. That night, I didn't just cross out her name. I erased the future I thought we shared. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always show itself in loud moments. Sometimes it hides in whispers behind half-closed doors. Sometimes it shows up in the silence between words, in glances exchanged across a room. And sometimes, it's printed neatly in 12-point font and left lying on your own kitchen counter. It started on a Wednesday. I hadn't planned to go out, but the heater was making that old clicking noise again, and I wanted to check if I still had the part from the last time it acted up. The only place I knew they stocked it was in town. While I was out, I thought I'd stop by Lila's and drop off her old baby photos, the ones I found while cleaning out the attic. She wasn't home. Neither was Travis. But the front door was unlocked, something they'd started doing since getting that fancy security system. "It'll alert us if anything moves," Travis had boasted once. So I let myself in. I'd done it before. Brought over a pie. Fed their cat. Watered the plants. I set the photo box on the kitchen table. That's when I saw it. A manila folder. Plain. Unlabeled. Just sitting there beside a stack of mail. I should have walked away. I know that. But something in me, call it instinct, call it curiosity, call it years of watching people's eyes shift when I entered the room, told me to look. I opened it. Inside, documents. Legal-looking ones. One was titled Durable Power of Attorney, Draft. Another said Request for Capacity Evaluation. My name was on every page. They were planning to have me declared legally incompetent. Not now, not yet. But soon. The paperwork was prepped. Just needed signatures. I flipped through the pages with shaking hands. One paragraph stood out. In the event of cognitive decline or demonstrated inability to manage property or financial affairs, it is recommended that all decisions regarding the estate address be transferred to Ms. Lila Harris. Ms. Lila Harris. My daughter. And she hadn't said a word. No talk. No concern. No, Dad, are you okay? Just assumptions and signatures. I sat down hard on one of their bar stools. Everything around me blurred, the sound of the clock ticking, the humming of their fancy fridge, even the smell of lavender from one of those plug-in things. It all faded behind the pounding in my ears. I remembered holding her tiny hand on her first day of kindergarten. She was scared. Clutching my fingers like a lifeline. I told her, "No one will ever let anything bad happen to you." Now she was preparing paperwork to decide when I was no longer capable of deciding for myself. I took a deep breath. Placed the documents exactly where I found them. Left the photo box. Walked out. Didn't say a word to her that day. Or the next. But everything inside me shifted. I began paying attention in a way I hadn't before. Next time she called, casually, during her commute, I noticed how she asked strange questions. "Have you been taking your meds? Do you remember what day it is today?" Cloaked in concern, sure. But there was a tone. Then came the suggestion, "You know, Dad, maybe it's time to think about long-term living. Somewhere safe. Structured." When I stayed quiet, she added quickly, "Of course, it's your decision. For now. For now." She used to say, "You'll always be in this house, Dad." Now she said, "For now." I started sleeping with one eye open. Metaphorically speaking. Watching, listening. Observing how Travis always brought conversations back to the house value. "It's tripled since you bought it, Gerald. Could be a great legacy." Legacy. That word started to feel like a leash. I went through my own files. Dug out the original will Marjorie and I wrote together. Back when Lila was still small enough to fit in my lap. I held it in my hands and felt a deep ache in my chest. She wasn't just trying to move me out. She was trying to erase me with kindness. Institutionalize me with care. Box me away in comfort. All while positioning herself as the dutiful daughter. The good one. There was a moment that night, after I'd reread the documents and the draft POA, when I sat in the armchair and remembered something Marjorie once said. It was after a parent-teacher night. Lila had drawn a picture of our family, just her and me, holding hands under a tree. I was crying, and Marjorie asked why. I told her, I just don't want her to forget how much we gave. Marjorie kissed my temple and said, she won't forget. But she may grow up thinking it's normal. And that's how love gets taken for granted, when it's mistaken for a given. At the time, I thought she was being too cynical. Now, I realized she'd seen the road long before I did. I made a decision that night. No more hoping. No more waiting for her to return to the girl I used to know. This wasn't neglect. It wasn't just distance. It was a plan. A quiet, coordinated plan. And I was going to make one of my own. Starting with a visit to someone I hadn't seen in a long time. My old friend Harold. He wasn't just my fishing buddy. He was also a damn good lawyer. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I didn't call first. I just showed up at their door the next Sunday with a pie in one hand and the folder in the other. Lila answered, wearing one of those silk robes she'd never let near a kitchen. Her smile was practiced, tight, polite. Dad. You should have called first. I brought pie, I said. And I figured it was time we had a little chat. She hesitated, just a moment, then opened the door wider. Of course. Come in. Travis was in the living room, scrolling through his phone like he was managing a Fortune 500. He barely looked up when I walked in. Hey, Gerald, he muttered. Sit down, I said. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. I had the kind of calm that comes after too much silence. The kind of stillness a man feels when there's nothing left to lose. Lila blinked. What's going on? I set the folder on the coffee table. Found these in your kitchen drawer last week, I said. Must have slipped out when I dropped off the photos. She looked at it, the manila folder she thought I'd never see. Her face went pale. I was researching, she started, voice faltering. Just in case. You've seemed tired lately, Dad. Tired, I repeated. Not forgetful. Not confused. Just tired. Travis leaned forward, finally paying attention. Look, Gerald, we were trying to be proactive. You live alone. That house is a lot. We were worried. You weren't worried, I said. You were preparing. Preparing to take everything I've worked for, before I'm even in the ground. Lila shook her head, eyes watering. That's not fair. You don't understand. It's complicated. It's not, I said. It's actually very simple. You think I'm no longer useful. That I've outlived my purpose. So instead of asking what I want, you made plans. Behind my back. The room was still. Just the sound of the ceiling fan clicking softly above us. Then Travis, ever the snake, tried to smile. We weren't trying to hurt you. It's just, well, you know how these things go. Better to have paperwork ready than wait until things get messy. Messy, I said. You mean when I stop signing things the way you want? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he had no comeback. Lila sat down, her shoulders folding in on themselves. We were trying to protect you, she said, barely a whisper. No, I said. You were trying to protect the house. The inheritance. Your version of comfort. Silence. Then, from the hallway, I heard a small voice. Grandpa?" It was my granddaughter, barefoot and half asleep. She looked at me with big, uncertain eyes. I smiled gently, despite everything. "Hey, kiddo." She walked over and sat next to me on the couch. Didn't say a word, just leaned her head against my arm. And that's when Lila's eyes finally filled with something that looked like shame. But it was too late. That night, I didn't yell. I didn't slam doors or storm out. I simply stood up, kissed my granddaughter's forehead, and said, "You'll be hearing from Harold." Travis looked confused. "Harold?" "Lawyer," I said. "And a better man than either of you will ever understand." I walked out with my folder in one hand and my dignity in the other. Back home, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. Edith from next door waved at me. She'd seen my truck pulling in. She came over a few minutes later with a plate of lemon cookies. "You look like a man who's had a day," she said, settling into the rocking chair beside mine. I smiled. "You could say that." She didn't press. Just sat there, letting the night do the talking. Sometimes, silence is the kindest language. After a while, I said, "Do you think people change? I mean, really change?" Edith sipped her tea. "No," she said. "I think they just get better at hiding who they were always becoming." We sat for a while longer, watching the stars poke through the sky. It was quiet, but not the hollow kind. It was the peaceful kind. After she left, I went inside and opened a new notebook. Wrote at the top of the first page. Things I still control. Underneath, I started a list. My will. My voice. My story. This house. Then I added one more. Who I leave it all to. I stared at that last line a long time. I thought about Marjorie. I thought about the day we bought this house. She walked through the empty rooms barefoot, twirling, laughing, saying, "This is where Lila will grow up. Right here." I whispered aloud, "She did grow up, Marge." And then, softer, but not how we hoped. The next morning, I called Harold. He didn't ask questions. Just said, "Come by at noon. I'll clear the books." Harold and I go back nearly 50 years. We started working at the garage the same summer, me under the hood, him behind the register, before he went off to law school. He always said he liked the precision of contracts more than the unpredictability of carburetors. When I walked into his office, he stood and gave me a real handshake, not the limp kind Travis gives, and looked me in the eyes like I still mattered. "You all right?" he asked. "No," I said. "But I'm here." That was enough. We sat down, and I placed the old will on his desk. He read it carefully, nodding now and then. When he got to Lila's name, he sighed. "She was such a sweet kid," he muttered. "Was," I said. I told him everything. The comments. The coldness. The paperwork. The silence. And finally, the dinner, her words about my hands. He didn't interrupt. Just listened the way real friends do, not to reply, but to understand. When I finished, he took a breath and said, "We can fix this." He pulled out a fresh template and asked, "What do you want?" I looked at him, eyes stinging. "I want this house to mean something again," I said. "I want it to go to someone who needs it. Not someone who assumes it." "Someone in particular?" "There's a veterans group my wife supported for years. They help elderly vets who've got no place to go. I want the house to go to them. Full rights. No loopholes." He nodded. "Good. What about your savings?" I thought about the rainy day fund, the emergency stash, the modest retirement accounts. "If anyone contests the will," I said, "it all goes to the animal shelter on Willow Lane. No second chances." He paused and smiled. "You've thought this through." "I've had time," I said. And Lila? I hesitated. I'll leave her a photo album, I said finally. That's all. The one with her as a baby, her first day of school, her first piano recital. Let her remember who I was before I became an obstacle. He raised an eyebrow. And the granddaughter? I softened. A letter and a small trust. But she has to come to me, alone. No Travis. No lawyers. No conditions. We worked through the rest of the details in silence. Paper after paper. Signature after signature. I signed each one with steady hands. Not the hands she mocked. The hands of a man who still knew how to protect what mattered. When it was done, Harold sealed everything in a large envelope and handed it to me. You sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything, I said. I walked out into the afternoon sun feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. Not power. Not revenge. Just quiet, steady control. At home, I sat on the porch and opened the envelope again. Read through every page twice. I thought about Lila, how she used to fall asleep on my chest after story time. How she'd once asked, "Will you always take care of me, Daddy?" And how I'd promised, always. I had kept that promise. Through late nights and early shifts. Through every scraped knee and broken heart. Through bills and bad weather. I had taken care of her. But I never thought I'd need to take care of myself from her. That night, I placed the new will in the safe behind the bookshelf, the one only Marjorie and I ever used. Then I walked into the kitchen and made myself tea. I sat in the living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of the old fridge, the ticking of the wall clock, and the creak of the wood under my chair. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready. I didn't know what was coming, what they'd say when they found out, what accusations would follow, but I knew this. They wouldn't get to rewrite my ending. Not while I still had a pen in my hand. The envelope came in the mail 2 weeks later. No return address. Just my name, typed neatly, like a bill or an advertisement. I opened it slowly, half expecting a card or some real estate flyer. But what I pulled out stopped me cold. Inside was a printed notice from a law office I'd never heard of. The letterhead read Barrow and Haynes, Family Transition Specialists. Below that, request for formal capacity assessment and legal guardianship review. It wasn't a suggestion this time. It was a legal step. They were trying to strip me of my independence. Officially. I read the letter 3 times. Sat in silence for nearly an hour. Then I folded it once, twice, and placed it next to my tea mug on the table. So this was it. I wasn't just tired or old in their eyes now. I was officially a problem. Something to be managed. Contained. I should have seen it coming. A week earlier, Lila had stopped by unannounced, the first time in months she came alone. She brought soup. Chicken and wild rice. My favorite. Or at least it used to be. She barely stayed 20 minutes. Talked too fast. Eyes darting. Asked again if I'd considered options for the future. Used phrases like reliable care and dignity in aging. I noticed her avoiding looking at the family photos on the wall. When she left, I noticed she'd left a key on the counter. A copy of my house key. No note. No explanation. Just left it there like it was her right. But the letter? The letter made it real. I knew what came next: hearings, evaluations, perhaps a forced move into a facility, as they like to call it. It wasn't concern. It was control. They wanted my home, my money, my silence. And they were ready to get it legally. That same day, I opened the safe behind the bookshelf. Pulled out the will. Reread every line. Checked the signatures. The notary stamp. The no contest clause. It was solid. Ironclad. But I wasn't done. I gathered every document I had, house deed, bank statements, medical records, letters from my doctor affirming I was of sound mind. Made copies. Labeled everything. Then I made a new folder. On the front, in bold black marker, if they try anything. Inside, I placed every page, every signature, every proof. I tucked it into the drawer by the front door, where the emergency flashlight used to be. Then I began to pack. Not my clothes, not yet. But everything important. The things I'd need when I faced them, not just as a father or an old man, but as a man with a plan. I packed the will. The notarized statements. The letter from Marjorie I'd kept all these years, the one she wrote before she passed, thanking me for building a home full of love. They'd turned that home into a prize. But I was going to remind them it had a history. I called Edith that evening and asked if she could help me print a few photos. I told her I needed them for something important. She didn't ask questions, just came by with a flash drive and a printer from her son's office. Together, we printed pictures of the house through the years. Lila's childhood birthday parties. Marjorie hanging laundry in the backyard. The swing I built by hand. The wall with Lila's height marked in pencil, year by year. We sat at the table, laying them out like a timeline. This house isn't just wood and nails, Edith whispered. It's a record. I nodded. Exactly. By the time she left, I had everything I needed. And I had made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for a courtroom or a lawyer's office. No. I was going to confront them myself. Not with yelling. Not with threats. But with the truth. A truth they'd have to hear in front of every person who ever believed in their lies. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week later, Lila sent a text. Anniversary party next Saturday. Small brunch at the house. Come if you feel up to it. If I feel up to it. As if I were already fading. As if my presence were optional, a courtesy. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed one word back, coming. Their house looked different that morning. Polished, staged, like it had been prepped for a showing instead of a celebration. A long white table stretched across the backyard, draped with linen. Champagne flutes sparkled in the sunlight. Everything was curated, cold, expensive. I walked in through the side gate. No one noticed me at first. They were too busy clinking glasses, laughing, taking pictures with those little instant cameras. Travis in a navy blazer, holding court with a few of his investors. Lila smiling wide, but it didn't touch her eyes. I hadn't seen that smile in years, the real one. This one was plastic. For show. I stood near the back for a moment, holding my manila folder. One of Travis's friends glanced over and said, "Hey, Gerald. Didn't know you'd make it." I smiled politely. Wouldn't miss it. Lila finally spotted me. Her smile twitched. "Dad," she said, walking over quickly. "You're here early." "Just on time," I said. "I've got something to share." She blinked. "Oh?" "Yes," I said. "With everyone." She hesitated. "Dad, this isn't really." I didn't wait. I walked to the center of the yard, tapped the side of a wine glass with a spoon. A few heads turned. More followed. "Excuse me," I said, loud but calm. "If I could have just a few moments of your time." Lila stepped forward, half whispering, "Dad, please." Travis touched her arm. "Let him talk," he said with that smug confidence of a man who thinks he holds all the cards. I opened the folder. "I want to thank you all for being here," I began. "I know today's a celebration of love, commitment, longevity. Lila and Travis, 10 years together. That's something. Lila smiled nervously. I continued, but it's also a day for truth. And clarity. I pulled out a sheet of paper. This is my new will. Signed. Notarized. Legally binding. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. I held it up. In this will, I leave my home, the very house my wife and I built with our own hands, not to my daughter. Not to her husband. But to the Veterans Foundation my wife devoted her final years to. Murmurs. Lila's face turned pale. Travis stepped forward, laughing nervously. Gerald, this really isn't the place. It's exactly the place, I said. I turned to the crowd. You see, a few weeks ago, I found documents in their kitchen. Drafts to declare me mentally unfit. Plans to move me into care. Behind my back. Without a word. Gasps now. I turned to Lila. You mocked my hands at dinner, Lila. The hands that fed you. That built your crib. That signed every check for your education. You laughed. And no one said a word. The crowd was still now. Frozen. I held up another page. This is a clause. It states that if this will is contested, everything, every last dollar, goes to the animal shelter. I looked at Travis. No lawyer of yours is going to wiggle through this. Lila's voice broke. Dad, why would you do this? I turned to her. Because I spent my life giving. And you spent yours calculating. You saw my age as weakness. My love as leverage. But I'm not gone yet. And I won't be erased quietly. I took a breath. Then I looked around the yard, the guests, the family, the friends. Let this be a reminder to all of you, legacy isn't owed. It's earned. I folded the papers slowly. Placed them back in the folder. Then I looked at my granddaughter, who stood by the fence, unmoving, eyes wide. For what it's worth, I said softly, my door is still open. To those who knock kindly. Then I walked out. No applause. No shouting. Just silence. And for once, that silence felt like respect. Not fear. Not pity. Respect. Brain, do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The days that followed were quiet, but not the kind I was used to. It wasn't the silence of an empty house, or the creak of floorboards in the middle of the night. No, this was different. This was the silence after a storm. The kind where the wind stops howling and the debris lies still, waiting to be cleared. I didn't hear from Lila. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a polite email trying to spin things into an apology. She disappeared, or maybe just retreated. The same way she always had when faced with something she didn't control. Travis, I figured, was likely doing damage control. Checking if the will was as real as I said. Probably calling lawyers, asking questions they didn't have good answers for. I half expected someone to show up at the house. Not with an apology, but with paperwork. An olive branch made of legal jargon. No one did. And maybe that was for the best. The town, however, didn't stay silent. Whispers started in the grocery store. Curious glances at the gas station. Edith told me she overheard someone at church say, "Did you hear what Gerald did? He cut his own daughter out. At their anniversary party." Good. Let them talk. It wasn't shame I felt, it was relief. For the first time in years, the weight pressing on my chest had lifted. I went back to my routines. Morning tea on the porch. Walking to the mailbox slowly, enjoying the late summer breeze. Tending to Marjorie's roses, which had bloomed early this year, as if the house itself approved of the decision I'd made. One afternoon, I took a walk through town. Not for errands. Just to feel the sidewalk under my feet. To nod at neighbors. To prove to myself, and maybe them, that I was still here. Still capable. Still standing. At the corner cafe, the barista, a girl no older than 20, smiled and said, "I liked what you said." At the party. I blinked. "You were there?" She nodded. "I'm friends with Travis's assistant. She invited me. Thought it would be fancy. But you were the only one who seemed real." I didn't know what to say. So I just nodded. "Thank you." At home, the quiet felt different. Not lonely. Just peaceful. I cleaned out old drawers. Donated clothes I didn't wear. Found a letter from Marjorie I hadn't read in years, folded between recipe cards in the kitchen drawer. It was short. Just a note she'd left one morning before work. If love ever becomes something we assume, remind them how hard it was earned. I sat at the table and read it 3 times. Later that week, I heard a knock. Not from the front door, from the side. The porch door. It was Edith. She held a pie in her hands. Blueberry. My favorite. "Saw you walking the other day," she said. "You looked a little less hunched." "I feel a little less hunched," I said. She stepped in without needing an invitation. We sat on the porch and ate warm pie on mismatched plates. She told me about her grandson's college applications, the neighbor's yappy dog, the mayor's failed attempt at another pothole fix. Normal things. Good things. Then she looked at me and said, "You did what most people never find the courage to do. You drew a line." I shrugged. "I just told the truth. Most people hide it under a smile," she said. "Or swallow it until it eats them alive." We sat in silence for a while after that. Just 2 old folks with tea and pie. And it felt more like family than any dinner I'd had in years. The next day, a small envelope came in the mail. No return address again. Inside was a single photo. Lila, age 10, sitting on my shoulders, laughing, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Best Dad Ever," in big blue crayon letters. No note. Just the photo. It wasn't an apology. But it was something. I placed it in the frame that used to hold her wedding picture. Set it on the mantel. Not out of spite. Out of memory. She was that girl once. I don't know if she ever will be again. But I'll remember her that way. Not for her sake. For mine. The idea came quietly, like most good things do. I was in the attic, sifting through boxes of Marjorie's books. She loved anything with pressed flowers or gold-edged pages, when I came across an old folder labeled Veterans Housing Proposal, Draft. I'd forgotten all about it. Years ago, she'd dreamed of turning our home, or one just like it, into a shelter for older veterans. She said, no one who served should ever sleep cold again. She was a schoolteacher with a soft voice, but when she believed in something, she became a force. After she passed, I tucked the folder away. Too painful to look at. But now? Now it felt like purpose. The house had grown quiet, yes, but not dead. It had bones. Warm ones. A kitchen with soul, a porch that invited confessions, a hallway lined with years. I sat on the attic floor with that folder in my lap, dust in my nose and sunlight cutting through the window. And I made a decision. It was time for the house to live again. Not for Lila. Not for me. But for the forgotten. I called Harold first. "Harold," I said, "I need to make another adjustment." He laughed. "You planning on disinheriting the dog now?" "No," I said. "I want to formalize the donation. I want the house to go to a non-profit, one that helps elderly veterans find transitional housing. The same one Marjorie supported. We're not waiting until I'm gone. I want to start now. There was a pause. Then he said, You serious? As a heart attack. I'll draft it. But Gerald, this is big. I know, I said. And I've never been more ready. Over the next few weeks, I made calls. Sat in on Zoom meetings. Talked to women with tired eyes and men with voices full of thank yous they didn't know how to say. I found the right group, one that didn't just house people but welcomed them like kin. People who'd seen combat in nursing homes, prisons, and park benches. They weren't asking for handouts. They just needed a door to knock on. And I had a door. I started clearing rooms. Took down Lila's posters. Folded away old linens. Painted the back bedroom, the one Marjorie always said would make a perfect reading nook. The work gave me life. I moved like a younger man, driven by something larger than myself. Edith came by one afternoon with 2 lemon pies and a pair of gloves. You're not doing all this alone, she said. She helped me box up old dishes, scrub the baseboards, sweep cobwebs. We played music from Marjorie's records, Nat King Cole, Sinatra, Ella. The house started to hum again. A week later, I met Carl. He was the first vet the organization sent to assess the space. 67. Quiet. Wore his hat low. Had hands like mine, worn, scarred, still useful. He walked through the house, pausing at every photo, every doorframe. This feels like home, he said. It was all I needed to hear. Within a month, we had 3 new residents on the list. All of them over 60. All of them clean, stable, looking for a place to belong. They'd each have their own room, shared meals, and a chance to rebuild. I ordered new bedding. Stocked the pantry. Cleaned out the shed so it could hold extra furniture. The house felt alive. Not just lived in, alive. One morning, I stood in the backyard, hands on my hips, sweat on my brow, looking at the garden that was once Marjorie's pride. And I didn't feel old. I felt useful. The mailbox filled with something new, thank you letters, donation receipts, a handmade card from a resident named Thomas who said, I haven't slept this well in 10 years. I pinned it to the fridge. Everywhere I looked, something was blooming. It wasn't just a new chapter. It was a different book. One I never expected to write. The first night they moved in, I didn't sleep. Not because of nerves. Not fear, either. It was the sound. For the first time in years, the house had voices again. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just, alive. Carl took the room with the eastern window, said the sunrise reminded him of his days in Okinawa. Donnie, a soft-spoken former Navy cook, chose the middle room and immediately started reorganizing my spice rack. Glenn, the last to arrive, brought an old acoustic guitar and claimed the small room near the porch. Said he hadn't played in front of anyone since '89, but the walls here felt safe. I listened to them settle in like the house was exhaling, years of tension finally leaving its frame. That first dinner was humble, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Donnie helped cook. Carl set the table. Glenn played a little tune while we ate. We clinked glasses, iced tea, mostly, and I offered a toast. To second homes, I said. And second chances. They all nodded. And I realized, in that moment, I didn't feel like the owner of the house anymore. I felt like its keeper. They began chipping in right away. Carl fixed the gutter I'd been meaning to patch for a year. Donnie cooked every Tuesday and Thursday, insisted on using his grandmother's chili recipe. Glenn mowed the lawn without being asked, said he liked the sound of the blades. They weren't guests. They were family. Not by blood. But by choice. And that made all the difference. The house changed, too. It stopped feeling like a museum of memories and started feeling like a place for new ones. There was laughter in the halls again. Music. The faint sound of a harmonica in the late afternoon. The smell of pancakes drifting through the vents on Sundays. I started leaving my door open again. Neighbors began stopping by, not out of curiosity, but community. Edith organized a small welcome lunch on the front lawn. She brought out folding chairs and lemonade. Folks brought pies, sandwiches, folding tables. Someone even printed a sign, "Welcome to Marjorie's house." That name stuck. One of the veterans asked who Marjorie was, and I pointed to the framed photo in the hall, her teaching in the backyard, chalk on her dress, laughing. "She's the reason this place breathes," I said. They nodded like they understood. Because they did. Not long after, my granddaughter showed up. Just after dusk, a week after the welcome lunch. She stood on the porch, holding a basket of tomatoes. From her school garden project, she said. She looked taller. Older. Different. But her eyes, those were still the same. She handed me the basket without speaking. We sat down on the porch. "I heard," she said finally. "Heard what?" "That you did something brave." I didn't answer. She looked around, listening to the quiet hum of music drifting from the house. "It's nice here," she said. "Doesn't feel like a place people forget." I smiled at that. We talked for a while, about her classes, her art, how she missed the lemon tree in the back. Then she asked the question that had been sitting in her eyes the whole time. "Why did you do it?" I looked at her. "Because I got tired of waiting for love to come from the wrong direction," I said. So I opened the door to where it still lived. She nodded slowly. Then asked, "Do I still get to come by?" I smiled. "Only if you promise to paint me something for the hallway." She grinned, real, wide, like when she was little. "Deal." She stayed for dinner that night. Helped Donnie with the dishes. Played a board game with Glenn. Asked Carl about the Navy. It was the first time in years I saw her belong without trying. And Lila? She never came. Never called. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she wouldn't. But from time to time, I'd see her car drive slowly past the house. She never stopped. Just looked. And I wondered if she understood what she'd lost. Not money. Not property. But warmth. Safety. The kind of family you can only earn by showing up with your whole heart. I didn't need her apology. Because I finally had a family who didn't need convincing that I was worth something. It was early October when she came. The air had just started to turn crisp. Marjorie's chrysanthemums were blooming in shades of orange and deep burgundy, and Donnie was out front raking leaves into neat little piles. I was on the porch, sipping my tea, watching the way the light hit the garden. Then I saw her car. Same sleek silver sedan. It rolled up slow, then stopped at the curb. The engine idled for a moment. I wasn't sure she'd get out. But then she did. Lila. She stood on the sidewalk for a second, clutching her purse like it was a shield. She looked thinner. Paler. Her hair was tied back the way Marjorie used to wear it when she was stressed. Her eyes met mine, then dropped to the porch floorboards. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. "Lila." She didn't move. "Is it all right if I come up?" I nodded once. She climbed the steps slowly, like each one carried a weight. When she finally sat beside me, I could see the way her hands trembled. She glanced at the house. Listened to Glenn playing something soft on his guitar inside. "It sounds different," she said. "It is." She nodded. Silence stretched between us. Then she pulled something from her purse, a small photo frame. Inside was a picture of her, about 8 years old, holding up a crayon drawing. Me, Marjorie, and her, stick figures under a big yellow sun. On top, in crooked letters, my family. I found this in a box, she said. Didn't even remember drawing it. I looked at the photo, then at her. You meant it when you drew it, I said. Her lips pressed together. I did. Another pause. Then, barely above a whisper, I don't expect you to forgive me. I didn't answer right away. Forgiveness is a strange thing. People think it's a switch you flip. But it's not. It's a seed. And some soil isn't ready. She looked at the porch railing, at the roses blooming beneath it. I was scared, she said. Of you getting older. Of not knowing what to do. Travis, he always made things sound logical. Practical. And I let him convince me that, preparing meant planning behind your back. She shook her head. I lost myself. And I forgot who you were. I sipped my tea. I didn't need perfect, I said. I just needed honesty. She swallowed hard. I was ashamed. After the party. I wanted to explain. But I didn't know how to face what I'd done. And then. I saw what you made this house into. She looked up, eyes glassy. You turned it into something good. Better than I ever imagined. It was always meant to be more, I said. Marjorie saw it before any of us did. She nodded. Then reached into her purse one more time and pulled out an envelope. I know the will's final, she said. I'm not here for that. I wrote you something. She handed it to me, a handwritten letter, folded neatly. I didn't open it. Not yet. I placed it on the table beside me. Then I looked at her, really looked. For the first time in years, she wasn't hiding behind politeness or performance. There was no distance in her voice. Just vulnerability. Just her. I exhaled slowly. You may not be in the will, I said. But you're still in my memories. And that's not nothing. She nodded again. We sat there, two people with too much behind them and not enough ahead. And that was enough. After a while, she stood. I'll go, she said. Didn't want to take too much of your time. You can come back, I said. If you ever want to see what love without conditions looks like. She looked at me, tears in her eyes. I'd like that. She walked down the steps, got in her car, and drove off, slowly, this time. Not away, just onward. I sat on the porch for a while longer. Watched the sun begin to dip behind the trees. Then I opened her letter. Just 4 words. I remember everything, Dad. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel sad. I felt seen. Speech balloon. Can forgiveness exist without forgetting? Share your thoughts and stay tuned for the final chapter. The ribbon was blue, Marjorie's favorite color. We tied it across the new front gate Carl built by hand. Glenn had painted a wooden sign to hang above it, Marjorie's house, a home for those forgotten. People came. More than I expected. Neighbors, a few veterans from other towns, church folks who remembered Marjorie's quiet prayers, and even some strangers who had simply heard about the old man who gave his house away. The mayor showed up, said a few words, posed for photos with his arm around me. But I wasn't there for the speeches. I was there for the sound. Laughter. Music. Community. The house had never looked better. Edith's grandkids had planted marigolds along the walkway. Donnie served his famous chili in paper bowls. Carl wore his dress blues, said it was the first time in years he felt like he had a reason to. Inside, the rooms were full. Not with boxes or memories, but with people. Living, breathing people. One of the newer residents, Hank, played piano in the living room. Someone sang along in the kitchen. A little girl danced barefoot on the rug Marjorie bought in '88. The place didn't feel like mine anymore. And that was the best part. I stood at the edge of the porch, hands in my pockets, watching them, the old, the young, the in-between, all gathered on soil that once held only silence. My granddaughter came up beside me. She wore overalls and a smear of dirt on her cheek. She'd spent the morning digging a spot for the rose bush she wanted to plant. Said it was for her grandmother. Said it was for beginnings. "You okay, Grandpa?" she asked. I looked at her. At her eyes. So much like Lila's when she was little. Full of questions. Full of hope. "I think I am," I said. She smiled and took my hand. Across the yard, Lila stood by the garden fence. She wasn't dressed for ceremony. No heels. No pearls. Just jeans and a sweater. She didn't wave. But she stayed. And that was enough. Carl tapped a spoon against his glass and nodded toward me. "Gerald," he said, "say something." I cleared my throat. Took a breath. And stepped forward. "This house," I said, "was built with love. And grief. And 1,000 little sacrifices no one ever saw." I paused. My wife believed in giving without needing to be noticed. In helping without keeping score. She said the truest kind of love is the kind that builds homes for others, even if you'll never live in them. A hush fell over the yard. I held up my glass of lemonade. To second chances. To chosen family. To everyone who's ever been made to feel like they were in the way, this place is yours. We raised our glasses. Even Lila. That night, as the sun went down, I sat on the porch alone for a little while. The lights inside glowed warm behind the windows. Laughter drifted out like music. Somewhere, someone played the guitar. A few kids ran through the yard chasing fireflies. And I thought of Marjorie. I imagined her sitting beside me, her hands in her lap, watching it all unfold with that quiet smile of hers. "You were right," I whispered. This house became more than walls. I took one last sip of tea and smiled. It lived again. And so did I.